In 1921, Ireland was divided into two countries. Northern Ireland was to remain a British territory, while the region to the south was to become independent from British rule. This came about from the Irish War of Independence, a struggle which had lasted from 1919 to 1921 and led to the Anglo-Irish Treaty. So, why did Ireland split up at all? To get a clearer understanding of how these events transpired, we gotta go way back to the 12th century. In 1169, the Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland saw the beginning of British occupation. There was no ordinary invasion here, though. At first, Anglo-Norman soldiers were merely helping a deposed Irish king regain his peace on the throne. Dermot MacMurrough was engaged in fierce hostilities with rival chieftains over his claim to the Leinster throne after his father died. At the time, Ireland was far from united, and kings often fought with each other over disputed rights to rule. MacMurrough was driven out of Ireland in 1166 and sought aid from England's King Henry II. Before giving the okay, Henry checked with the Pope. Ireland's form of Christianity differed from Rome's, but the Pope gave his blessing. Henry permitted MacMurrough to use his soldiers on the provision that land would be granted to any of his lords who wished to settle in Ireland. The English soldiers quickly overpowered Irish rebels, many of whom were armed with a handful of rocks. And so began a long, bloody, and bitter period of English occupation in Ireland, bringing with it English laws, religion, customs, and language. In the late 16th century, England had control of Dublin, while the rural areas of Ireland were still hotly contested. The northern area of Ulster was yet to succumb to English rule, and this region was to see some of the bloodiest fighting in Irish history. By 1593, many Irish were strongly opposed to the English presence and sought desperately to break away to be independent. The Gaelic lord Hugh O'Neill led rebel forces in efforts to seize back control to Ireland from the British, resulting in the 9 Years' War, which was fought from 1594 to 1603. O'Neill was a savvy leader, and he was able to amass some 8,000 troops, giving the British some serious opposition. He sought the help of Spain, who readily agreed to supply troops to combat English forces. However, the British army was simply too experienced and better armed. They tightened the grip on Ireland, and the previously unoccupied Ulster to the north fell to British control. For O'Neill and many other Gaelic lords, it was time to relocate. In 1607, they left Ireland in droves, heading for Europe in voluntary exile. The mass exodus of this was known as the Flight of the Earls. Although the Gaelic lords were determined to regroup and come back with the aid of Spain, they were never to return. Ireland remained more than ever under British control, despite there being plenty of resentment. In 1609, the plantation of Ulster began, and for the next 80 years, land was allocated to English and Scottish settlers. Protestant settlers flocked to the Ulster region, and new towns such as Derry and Belfast were built. Needless to say, this incensed many Catholic Irish who felt that they were being persecuted. In 1641, the Catholics staged a rebellion against the plantations for free settlers. They demanded self-governance, and bloody battles erupted in Ulster and then throughout Ireland. The Irish Rebellion made it clear that English forces in Ireland would always be opposed. Thousands of Protestants were killed, with estimates varying from 4,000 to over 10,000. The rebellion took place just before the English Civil War, which saw Oliver Cromwell wrestle power from the king. In 1649, Cromwell was quick to exact ruthless revenge on the Irish rebels, and British forces entered Ireland, embarking onto a sea of executions and land confiscations that lasted for 10 years. Approximately half of the land owned by Irish Catholics was confiscated by England and given to Protestant settlers in what became known as the Cromwellian Settlement. The Irish were banished to outposts such as Galway in the far west of the country. Crops were burned, livestock was slaughtered, and all towns in Ireland gradually fell under Cromwell's control. Ireland had a parliament, however, it was basically overseen by London. Besides, Catholics weren't permitted to run for Parliament and had virtually no say in the running of the country. This was despite Irish Catholics forming the bulk of the population. The French Revolution of 1789 thus gave hope to the discontented masses in Ireland. They saw the fight for liberty in France, and they drew immediate comparisons. The United Irishmen were formed in 1791, a group of revolutionaries determined to bring about change. They wanted more rights and better conditions for people living on the land. Ultimately, the United Irishmen were hell-bent on creating a separate republic in Ireland. It seemed to be only a matter of time. 1798 saw yet another rebellion, and again the British had a serious fight on their hands. This one coincided with the war between England and France. Ireland requested military aid from France, which they got, but again to no avail. The rebellion was squashed, and Britain decided that there was no choice but to get rid of the Irish Parliament. From 1800, Ireland was ruled directly by the ruling powers in London, and so it continued. British and Protestant landlords controlled most of the land and would rent it out to Catholic farmers. Living conditions were often severe, and in 1845, Ireland was reeling from the Great Famine, which lasted for 5 years, and saw a mass emigration from the Emerald Isle. Approximately 1 million people left Ireland to start new lives overseas in America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. At the turn of the century, events were heating up in Europe, and soon Britain had its hands full with the onset of World War I. Irish Republicans again began making plans for serious armed uprising. It came on the Easter weekend of 1916. Most of the fighting was in Dublin, and the street battles raged on for 6 days. Almost 500 people were killed, many of them civilians, and over 100 British soldiers were killed in the violence. The British Army was simply too powerful regardless, and control was soon regained, although much of Dublin was destroyed. However, the ensuing executions of the Republican organizers resulted in greater support and sympathy for the independence movement. The backing for the Republicans was now nationwide. At the end of the Great War, general elections were held where a large number at that, of Irish voted for the Sinn Féin party, which represented an independent Irish parliament. This new government also had courts and collected taxes, meaning that Ireland now had 2 governments. The Irish Republican Army was swift to punish anyone for supporting the British government, and after 3 years of continued hostilities, a treaty was finally reached. In 1921, Republican leaders Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith negotiated with Britain, and the Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed. Under the Government of Ireland Act, Ireland was divided in 2 countries. Northern Ireland was established in the Ulster region to the north and was made up of 6 of the 9 Ulster counties. The rest of the country was to be an independent Ireland. After hundreds of years of disputes and uprisings, Ireland was once again free to pursue its independent rule. For the immediate future, Northern Ireland will remain in the United Kingdom. Things can only change if the majority of people opt for change. So who knows what could happen? Could the entire country one day become united? Change is, after all, something the Irish know a lot about.